The warning lights flashed red across the control panel of the Wanderer as Jack Morrison guided his cargo hauler through the debris field. Twisted metal fragments drifted past his viewport, remnants of what had been Kronos Station just 3 days ago. The station had been home to 15,000 people before the attack. Now it was just scattered wreckage and silent graves. Jack ran a hand through his dark hair and sighed. He should not be here. The sector was still dangerous, with raider ships possibly lurking in the area. But salvage was salvage, and his fuel tanks were running low. He needed credits, and debris fields like this one often held valuable components that survived the destruction. His scanner beeped, picking up a faint energy signature half a kilometer away. Jack adjusted his course, bringing the Wanderer closer to investigate. As he approached, his eyes widened. It was a ship, or what remained of one. The vessel had been sleek once, built for speed and combat. Now it was broken nearly in half, its hull breached in a dozen places, but what caught his attention was the design. Jack recognized those angular lines and the dark purple plating. This was a Valkyrie ship. His jaw tightened. The Valkyrie Empire was one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, and they were not known for their kindness. Their warriors were brutal, efficient, and they viewed most other species as inferior. Jack should have turned away. Nothing good came from dealing with the Valkyrie. But his scanner showed something else. Something that made him pause. There was a life sign aboard that wreck. Someone was still alive in there. He stared at the reading for a long moment. Every instinct told him to leave. If that was a Valkyrie warrior, they would probably try to kill him the moment they recovered. The Valkyrie did not accept help from humans. They barely acknowledged humans as worth noticing. But Jack had been a combat medic once. Back when he served in the Frontier Defense Corps. He had taken an oath to preserve life, to help the wounded, regardless of who they were. That oath had ended when he left the service 5 years ago. But some habits were hard to break. He brought the Wanderer alongside the wreck and extended the docking tube. The seal was not perfect given the damage, but it would hold long enough. Jack pulled on his environment suit, checked his medical kit, and grabbed a plasma cutter. He would need it to get through the damaged bulkheads. The interior of the Valkyrie ship was a mess. Conduits hung from the ceiling, sparking occasionally. The lights were out, and Jack's helmet lamp cut through the darkness in a narrow beam. He followed his handheld scanner deeper into the ship, stepping over debris and trying not to think about what would happen if the wreck suddenly broke apart. He found her in what looked like a command center. She was slumped against a console. One hand pressed to her side where dark blue blood seeped between her fingers. Her skin was a pale gray blue, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. She wore the uniform of a Valkyrie officer, though it was torn and stained. Jack had never seen a Valkyrie up close before. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, with sharp features and white hair that fell past her shoulders. Even injured and dying, she looked dangerous. He knelt beside her and opened his medical kit. Her eyes snapped open, bright gold and filled with pain. Her free hand moved with surprising speed, reaching for a weapon at her belt. Jack caught her wrist gently but firmly. "Easy," he said, his voice calm through the suit's speaker. "I am here to help." She stared at him, her golden eyes narrowing. She said something in her own language, words he did not understand. But the tone was clear. It was a challenge, maybe a threat. Jack released her wrist and held up his hands, showing the medical supplies. "I am a medic. You are bleeding out. If I do not treat that wound in the next few minutes, you will die." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then her hand fell away from the weapon. Though whether from acceptance or simple weakness, Jack could not tell. He went to work immediately. The wound in her side was deep, probably from shrapnel during whatever battle had destroyed her ship. He cleaned it as best he could, applied a coagulant gel that worked on most species, and sealed it with medical adhesive. It was not perfect, but it would keep her alive long enough to get her to his ship. "Can you walk?" he asked. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Jack caught her before she fell, supporting her weight. She was heavier than she looked. All muscle and dense bone structure. He half carried, half dragged her back through the wrecked ship to the docking tube. Getting her aboard the Wanderer took effort, but Jack managed it. He brought her to the small medical bay and laid her on the treatment bed. Under better lighting, he could see just how badly injured she was. Besides the wound in her side, she had burns on her left arm and what looked like a concussion. Jack worked through the night, using every bit of his old training. He set up an IV drip with a universal fluid that would help with the blood loss. He treated the burns and bandaged them carefully. He monitored her vital signs, adjusting the treatment as needed. She woke several times, always with that same suspicious, dangerous look in her eyes. Each time, Jack simply continued working, speaking in a quiet, steady voice. He told her what he was doing, explained each procedure, and made no sudden movements. By the time the station's artificial morning arrived, her condition had stabilized. She was still weak, still in pain, but she would live. Jack sat in a chair beside the medical bed, exhausted. He had not slept, running on stimulants and adrenaline. The Valkyrie warrior watched him from the bed. She had not spoken since he brought her aboard, not in any language he understood. But something had changed in her expression. The hostility was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Confusion, maybe, or curiosity. Jack stood and checked her vitals one more time. Everything looked stable. He told her to rest, that they would talk later. And then, he left the medical bay. He needed to set a course for the nearest station where she could get proper treatment. As he sat in the pilot's chair and plotted the route, he wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The Valkyrie were not known for gratitude. More likely, she would report this to her superiors, and he would end up on some imperial watch list. But he had made his choice. He had found someone dying, and he had saved them. Whatever came next, he would deal with it. That was the only way Jack knew how to live. Behind him, in the medical bay, Lyra stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what had just happened. A human had saved her life. It made no sense. Humans were weak, emotional creatures that the Empire barely tolerated. They certainly did not risk themselves for Valkyrie warriors, yet this one had. He had pulled her from the wreckage, treated her wounds, and asked for nothing in return. In her culture, such an act would demand a life debt. But humans did not think that way, did they? She closed her eyes, feeling the pain medication pulling her toward sleep. When she woke, she would have questions for this strange human, and depending on his answers, she would decide whether to kill him or spare him. For now, though, she simply rested, alive because of a choice that should never have been made. Lyra woke to the sound of footsteps outside the medical bay. Her hand went immediately to her side, but the weapon was gone. Of course it was. The human would have been foolish to leave her armed. She tested her body carefully, moving each limb. The pain was still there, but manageable. The wound had been properly treated. The door opened, and the human entered carrying a tray. He was younger than she had first thought. Maybe 30 standard years. He had dark hair, tired eyes, and moved with the efficiency of someone who had seen combat. A former soldier, perhaps. "You are awake," he said, setting the tray on a small table beside the bed. "I brought food. I am not sure what your species can eat, but this should be safe. Basic proteins and nutrients." Lyra looked at the food, then back at him. "Why?" "Why what?" Jack asked, checking the medical monitor beside her bed. "Why did you save me?" He glanced at her, then returned his attention to the monitor. "I am Valkyrie." She said it like that should explain everything. I noticed. He adjusted something on the IV drip. "Your vital signs are improving. The wound is healing faster than I expected. Your biology must have good regenerative properties." I noticed are great. Lyra felt frustration rising. This human was not reacting the way he should. He should be afraid of her, or trying to curry favor, or planning to ransom her. Instead, he treated her like she was just another patient, no different from anyone else. "Do you know what my people do to humans?" she asked. Jack pulled up a chair and sat down. He looked tired. "I have heard stories. The Velkari Empire does not think much of humanity. You consider us weak and sentimental. You have raided our outer colonies, taken our ships, and generally made it clear we are beneath your notice." He paused. "But you were bleeding out in a wrecked ship. Whatever your people have done, I could not just leave you to die." "That is weakness," Lyra said, though the words felt strange in her mouth. "Maybe." Jack shrugged. "Or maybe it is strength. I guess it depends on how you define those words." Over the next 2 days, they fell into an uneasy routine. Jack would come to check on her regularly, bringing food and water, changing her bandages, and monitoring her recovery. He did not talk much unless she asked questions, and he never asked about her mission or why her ship had been destroyed. Lyra found herself watching him carefully. He moved through the small cargo ship with practiced ease, handling repairs and course adjustments like someone who had lived alone for a long time. The ship itself was old, but well maintained. Every system had been modified or upgraded, usually with parts that did not quite match, but worked well enough. On the 3rd day, she was strong enough to leave the medical bay. Jack gave her some of his spare clothes since her uniform was ruined. They were too big, but she made them work. She found him in the cockpit, drinking something dark and bitter-smelling from a metal cup. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Haven's Gate," Jack replied, not turning from the viewport. "It is a neutral trading port. You can get transport from there, back to Velkari space." Lyra moved closer, looking out at the stars streaking past. "You are taking me home. I am taking you somewhere safe. What you do after that is your choice." She sat in the co-pilot chair, studying his profile. "You never asked. What happened to my ship? Not my business. What if I am a criminal? What if I did something terrible?" Jack finally looked at her. "Did you? No. But you did not know that when you saved me." "True." He took another sip from his cup. "But I figured if you were dangerous, I would deal with it when the time came. Right then, you were just someone who needed help." Lyra leaned back in the chair. In her culture, every action had a purpose, a strategy. Warriors did not act without thinking of the consequences. Yet this human had risked himself without knowing anything about her, without calculating the potential rewards or dangers. "Tell me about Earth," she said suddenly. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Earth? Why? I want to understand." So he told her. He spoke about the blue and green world where humans came from, about its vast oceans and diverse climates. He talked about humanity's early struggles to reach the stars, how they had been late to join the galactic community and had to fight for every scrap of respect. He mentioned the wars, the failures, and the stubborn refusal to give up even when it would have been easier. Lyra listened and slowly began to see a pattern. Humans did not think like Velkari. Where her people valued strength and conquest, humans valued perseverance and cooperation. Where Velkari saw weakness in helping others, humans saw it as building alliances and community. "Your people are strange," she said when he finished. "We get that a lot," Jack replied with a slight smile. "In my empire, what you did would be seen as foolish. Mercy is for the weak. The strong take what they want and destroy those who oppose them." Jack set down his cup. "And how is that working out for your empire?" The question caught her off guard. She thought about the endless conflicts, the constant need to prove strength, the way Velkari warriors were always looking over their shoulders for the next challenge. "We are powerful," she said, but even to her own ears, it sounded hollow. "Power built on fear is unstable," Jack said quietly. "It only takes one crack for the whole thing to come apart." Lyra wanted to argue, to defend her culture and her people. But something stopped her. She had seen the cracks Jack spoke about. She had seen the political games, the backstabbing, the way strength was the only currency that mattered. And she had seen where that led. "I am Commander Lyra," she said abruptly. "Daughter of High Admiral Cross, third seat of the Imperial Council." Jack looked at her with surprise. "You are Imperial nobility?" "Yes. And the ship you found me in was a diplomatic vessel. I was on a peace mission to the Kronos sector when we were attacked." She paused. "By my own people." Jack straightened in his chair. "What?" Lyra felt the weight of the secret she had been carrying. She should not tell this human anything. But something about his honest, direct manner made her want to trust him. "My empire is not as united as it appears. There are factions, groups fighting for control. Some believe in the old ways, in honor and strength through unity. Others want absolute power, no matter the cost. And these others attacked you? They want me dead because of who my father is. He represents the old guard, those who would limit the empire's aggression. There are those who see this as weakness, who want to expand our territory through any means necessary." Jack rubbed his face with both hands. "And I just pulled imperial politics into my cargo hauler." "Great." Despite herself, Lyra felt a small smile. "I told you that you should have left me to die." "Yeah, well, too late now." He looked at her seriously. "Are you in danger still? Will they come looking for you?" "Probably. But they will assume I died in the attack. For now, I am a ghost." She met his eyes. "I am telling you this because you saved my life. In my culture, that creates a debt. But more than that, you have shown me something I did not expect. You have shown me that there are other ways to be strong." Jack was quiet for a moment. "What will you do? Go back and fight this faction? I do not know. If I return, I will be walking into a war. But if I hide, my people will suffer." She clenched her fists. "The faction that wants power, they plan to make an example. They want to attack human colonies to show the galaxy that mercy has no place in their new empire." Jack's expression darkened. "When?" "Soon. Within the next few months." Lyra looked at him. "That is why I was on a diplomatic mission. My father was trying to open communications, to build bridges before it was too late. But the warmongers found out and decided to end it. You need to warn someone. Your father, the council, whoever can stop this. My father may already be dead. If they were willing to kill me, they would not hesitate to eliminate him." Lyra stood and paced the small cockpit. "The only way to stop them is to expose the conspiracy. But the proof is locked in their systems, in places I cannot reach alone." Jack watched her pace, then made a decision that would change everything. "Then, you need help." She stopped and looked at him. "You cannot be serious. You said they are planning to attack human colonies. That makes it my problem too." He stood and faced her. "I may just be one guy with a cargo hauler, but I know people. I know how to move quietly through the galaxy. And apparently, I am already involved whether I like it or not." Lyra felt something unfamiliar in her chest. Hope. Maybe. Or something close to it. This human had no reason to help her further. He had already risked enough. But here he was, offering to throw himself into a conflict that could get him killed. "Why?" she asked again. The same question from days before. Jack's answer was simple. "Because it is the right thing to do." In that moment, Lyra understood something fundamental about humans. Something her empire had always missed. They were not weak because they showed compassion. They were dangerous because they would fight for others, even strangers, even former enemies. That kind of loyalty, that kind of stubborn morality, was a strength her people had never developed. "Then we will need a plan," she said. Jack sat at the navigation console, running calculations, while Lyra explained the layout of Velkari space. They had been planning for 6 hours straight, and his head was starting to hurt from all the information. The more he learned about the Velkari Empire, the more he realized how insane this whole situation was. The Eternal Reign is the flagship of War Master Draven's fleet, Lyra said, pointing to a star chart. It is where he would keep all the evidence of his conspiracy. Communication logs, assassination orders, the complete plan for the attack on human space. And it is surrounded by how many other ships? Jack asked, already knowing he would not like the answer. At least 200, probably more. Draven commands the largest battle group in the Empire. Lyra's expression was grim. He has been building his power for years, gathering loyalists and eliminating opposition. Jack leaned back in his chair. So we need to infiltrate the most heavily defended ship in the Velkari fleet, steal classified data, and get out alive. Have I got that right? Yes, just checking. He rubbed his eyes. You know this is impossible, right? Lyra looked at him steadily. You said you would help. I did, and I will. But I want to make sure we both understand that this will probably get us killed. He stood and poured himself more coffee from the dispenser. Tell me about Draven. What kind of person is he? He is a true believer in Velkari supremacy. He thinks our empire should rule the entire galaxy, that other species exist only to serve us or die. Lyra's voice was cold. And one. 17. Today, he is brilliant, ruthless, and completely without mercy. Sounds like a lovely guy. After my father argued for peace with the human colonies, Draven began planning his removal. My father has allies. Other admirals who believe the Empire is strong enough without constant conquest. But Draven has been patient, building support among the younger officers who want glory and expansion. Jack sipped his coffee, thinking. So, this is not just about stopping an attack. This is a civil war, waiting to happen. Yes, and when it does, millions will die. Lyra stood and walked to the viewport. My father believed that the Empire could change, that we could find strength in cooperation instead of domination. Draven will destroy that possibility forever. What about you? Jack asked. What do you believe? Lyra was quiet for a long moment. A week ago, I would have said I believed in the Empire without question. I was raised to be a warrior, to value strength above all else. But then a human saved my life for no reason except that it was the right thing to do. She turned to face him. You have made me question everything I thought I knew about strength and weakness. Jack set down his cup. I am just one person, Lyra. Not all humans are like me. We have our share of people like Draven, too. Those who want power and do not care who gets hurt. But your culture does not celebrate them as heroes. You do not build empires on their philosophy. Lyra moved closer. That is the difference. In my empire, Draven is seen as powerful and worthy of respect. In your culture, he would be seen as a criminal. True enough. Jack pulled up a schematic of the Eternal Reign on his console. Okay, let us think about this practically. We cannot fight our way onto that ship. We need to sneak in. My command codes should still be active, Lyra said. Draven will have kept them running to maintain the appearance that I am merely missing, not murdered. If we can disguise your ship as a Velkari supply vessel, we might be able to dock without raising alarms. Jack examined the schematic. Your ships have different power signatures than human vessels. I would need to modify the Wanderer's reactor output, change the emissions profile. He ran some calculations. It would take 3 days, maybe 4, and I would need parts I do not have. Haven's Gate will have what you need. It is a black market hub. Everything is available for the right price. Which brings us to the next problem, Jack said. Money. I have enough credits to keep us fed and fueled. But major ship modifications? That is going to be expensive. Lyra reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small data chip. My personal accounts. There should be enough there to cover our needs. Jack raised an eyebrow. You are an Imperial commander. How much money are we talking about? Enough to buy a small fleet if we wanted. Good to know. He took the chip and plugged it into his console. The numbers that appeared made him whistle. Yeah, this will cover it. They spent the rest of the journey to Haven's Gate refining their plan. Jack would modify the Wanderer to pass as a Valkyrie ship. Lyra would forge the necessary clearance codes and documentation. They would approach the Eternal Reign during a scheduled supply run, dock, and then slip into the ship's data core. The hard part is getting to the core, Lyra explained. It will be in the secure section of the ship, surrounded by guards, and locked behind multiple security layers. Can you access it with your codes? Possibly. But if Draven suspects I am alive, he will have changed the security protocols. She frowned. We will need a backup plan. Jack thought for a moment. What if we do not sneak in quietly? What if we create a distraction? What kind of distraction? I still have some equipment from my military days. Smoke bombs, electromagnetic pulse charges, that sort of thing. If we set them off in the right places, we could create enough chaos to slip past the guards. Lyra considered this. It would work, but only if we time it perfectly. And once the alarm is raised, we will have minutes at most before the entire ship comes down on us. Then we better be fast. Jack saved their plans to a secure file. One more question. Once we have the evidence, what do we do with it? If we just send it to your government, will they believe it? Or will Draven's people bury it? We broadcast it everywhere. Every news outlet, every government, every military channel in the galaxy. We make it impossible to hide. Lyra's expression was determined. The truth will shatter Draven's support. Many follow him because they believe he represents the Empire's strength. But if they see he is willing to murder his own people for power, they will turn on him. You hope. It is all we have. Haven's Gate appeared on their sensors 2 days later. The station was a massive structure, built from the combined hulls of dozens of derelict ships. It orbited a dead planet in neutral space, governed by no single power, and home to traders, smugglers, and anyone who wanted to avoid official scrutiny. Jack guided the Wanderer to a docking bay and paid the fee in untraceable credits. As they walked through the station's crowded corridors, Lyra drew looks from other beings. Valkyrie were not common here, and her presence made some of the merchants nervous. They found a ship modification specialist in the lower levels, a grizzled alien named Kev, who asked no questions when Jack explained what he needed. For a generous fee, Kev agreed to modify the Wanderer's power signature and provide forged Valkyrie identification codes. This is dangerous work you are planning, Kev said, as his crew began the modifications. Valkyrie do not like people pretending to be them. We will be careful, Jack assured him. While the work was being done, Jack and Lyra found a quiet bar on the station's commercial level. They sat in a corner booth, watching the mix of species coming and going. A human and a Valkyrie sitting together drew some attention. But no one bothered them. Tell me about your father, Jack said. What is he like? Lyra's expression softened slightly. He is a warrior, like all Valkyrie of his generation. But he is also wise. He has seen too many wars, lost too many soldiers, and he began to question whether conquest was really making us stronger. She traced a pattern on the table with her finger. When I was young, he told me that true strength is knowing when not to fight. Sounds like a smart man. He is. And if Draven has killed him, I will make sure it was not in vain. Her golden eyes hardened. This conspiracy will be exposed. The galaxy will know what Draven planned to do. Jack nodded. When we get that data, I will make sure it reaches the right people. I still have contacts in human military intelligence. They will know how to use it. 3 days later, the Wanderer was ready. The ship now broadcast a Valkyrie power signature and carried forged identification codes that marked it as a supply vessel assigned to the Outer Fleet. Lyra had created a complete cover story about delivering medical supplies to the Eternal Reign. As they prepared to depart Haven's Gate, Jack ran through final checks on his equipment. The modifications had drained most of Lyra's credits. But they had everything they needed. Smoke charges, EMP devices, a portable data extractor, and enough firepower to fight their way out if things went wrong. "Are you ready for this?" Lyra asked from the co-pilot seat. Jack engaged the engines and guided the ship out of the docking bay. "No. But I am doing it anyway. Remember. Anyone. For my engine. Flash remember. I'm on Montaigne 1B. Lyra smiled slightly. "That is very human of you. I will take that as a compliment." They jumped to hyperspace, heading deep into Valkyrie territory. The journey would take 5 days. 5 days to prepare themselves for what might be a one-way trip. Jack spent the time maintaining his equipment and studying the layout of the Eternal Rain until he could navigate it in his sleep. Lyra meditated, a Valkyrie practice that helped warriors focus their minds before battle. She also taught Jack some basic phrases in her language, words that might help him pass as a servant or technician if they were stopped. On the 5th day, they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Draven's fleet. Jack's hands were steady on the controls, but his heart was racing. Hundreds of Valkyrie warships filled the view screen, enough firepower to destroy entire planets. "This is it," Lyra said quietly. "Once we approach, there is no turning back." Jack took a deep breath and opened a communication channel. Supply vessel Delta 7, requesting docking clearance with the Eternal Rain. There was a pause that felt like an eternity. Then a voice responded in Valkyrie, which Lyra's translator converted. "Delta 7. Transmit your authorization codes." Lyra entered the codes into the system. Jack watched the scanner, waiting to see if alarms would sound, if weapons would lock onto them. The voice came back. "Codes accepted. Proceed to docking bay 12. Welcome to the Eternal Rain." Jack let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. They were in. The Wanderer settled into docking bay 12 with a soft thud. Jack ran through the shutdown sequence while Lyra checked their equipment one last time. They both wore dark clothes that could pass for worker uniforms, and Lyra had tied her white hair back to make herself less recognizable. "Remember," Lyra said quietly, "stay behind me and look like you belong here. If anyone asks, you are a hired technician. Let me do the talking." Jack nodded and grabbed his tool bag, which contained their real equipment hidden under a layer of actual repair tools. They opened the cargo ramp and stepped onto the deck of the Eternal Rain. The docking bay was enormous, large enough to hold 50 ships the size of the Wanderer. Crews moved back and forth, loading and unloading supplies. Valkyrie soldiers stood guard at every entrance, their weapons ready. The air smelled of metal and ozone. A young officer approached them, carrying a data pad. "You are the medical supply delivery?" "Yes," Lyra replied in Valkyrie, her tone bored and professional. The officer consulted his pad. "Bay Storage 3. But we were not expecting this delivery for another week." Lyra did not hesitate. Command moved up the schedule. "If you have a problem with it, take it up with Fleet Logistics." The officer frowned, but made a notation on his pad. "Fine. Unload and report to the cargo master." He walked away, already moving on to the next task. Jack let out a quiet breath. The first test was passed. They moved deeper into the ship, following the signs toward the cargo section. But instead of going to the storage bay, Lyra led them down a side corridor when no one was looking. "The data core is 17 levels up," she whispered. "We take the service lifts. They are less monitored than the main elevators." They found a lift and rode it up in tense silence. Each floor that passed was another chance to be caught, but the lift was empty except for them, and when the doors opened on level 17, the corridor beyond was quiet. Lyra checked the corridor carefully before stepping out. Jack followed, his hand near the weapon concealed in his jacket. They moved through the ship's passages. Lyra, navigating from memory. The Eternal Rain was a floating city, home to thousands of crew members. They passed common areas, living quarters, and training facilities. The data core is in the command section, Lyra said. But there will be guards. Lots of them. As they rounded a corner, they saw what she meant. Ahead, 2 Valkyrie guards stood outside a heavy blast door. Both were armed and alert. There was no way to slip past them unnoticed. Jack and Lyra ducked back around the corner. "Time for Plan B," Jack said, pulling an EMP charge from his bag. "Are you sure about this?" Lyra asked. "No, but we are out of options." He set the charge timer for 30 seconds and placed it in a ventilation grate. "When it goes off, the lights will die and their weapons will be useless. We have to move fast." They waited, counting down in their heads. The EMP charge detonated with a muffled thump. Instantly, the corridor lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. Jack and Lyra ran forward. The guards were confused, trying to activate their weapons. Jack hit the first one hard, using techniques he had learned in combat training. The guard went down. Lyra took the second, moving with a speed and precision that reminded Jack she was a trained warrior. In seconds, both guards were unconscious. "That will bring security," Lyra said, pulling access cards from one of the guards. "Then we better hurry." Jack helped her drag the guards out of sight. Lyra pressed the access card to the blast door's scanner. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door hissed open, revealing the data core beyond. It was a circular room filled with computer banks and holographic displays. And standing in the center, as if he had been waiting for them, was War Master Draven. He was tall, even for a Valkyrie, with silver hair and scars marking his face. He wore the black and red uniform of a fleet commander, and his expression was one of cold amusement. "Commander Lyra," he said in perfect standard speech. "I wondered when you would arrive." Lyra's hand went to her weapon, but Draven was faster. He gestured, and armed soldiers stepped from the shadows, at least a dozen of them, all with weapons trained on Jack and Lyra. "Did you really think I would not know you were alive?" Draven continued. "I have been tracking you since you left Kronos Station. Your command codes triggered alerts the moment you used them." He smiled. "I have been waiting to see what you would do." Oh. Jack felt his stomach drop. They had walked right into a trap. "Why let us get this far?" Lyra demanded. "Because I wanted to see if you would bring allies. I wanted to know if anyone else knew about my plans." "This human saved my life," Lyra said. "Yes, I read the reports. Quite touching." Draven moved closer. "Your father was the same way, always talking about cooperation and peace. It made him weak. That is why he was so easy to kill." Lyra's face went pale. "You killed him yourself?" "Of course. I wanted him to know it was me, to see the new empire being born." Draven's expression was cruel. "He died begging me to spare you. I told him I would, right before I sent the ships to destroy your vessel." Jack saw Lyra's whole body tense. He knew she was about to do something reckless. He also knew they had one chance, and it depended on the distraction Lyra was about to create. Lyra screamed and charged at Draven. The guards opened fire, but she was already moving, dodging with incredible speed. Jack threw himself behind a computer bank and pulled the smoke charges from his bag. He triggered all 3 at once and threw them in different directions. The room filled with thick, dark smoke. The guards fired blindly, their shots hitting walls and equipment. Jack could hear Lyra and Draven fighting, the sound of impacts and weapons clashing. Jack pulled out the portable data extractor and crawled to the nearest terminal. His hands shook as he plugged it in and started the download sequence. The device began pulling every file it could access, all the communications, all the orders, all the evidence of Draven's conspiracy. A guard stumbled through the smoke, coughing. Jack hit him with a wrench from his tool bag, not enough to kill but enough to drop him. He crouched back down and watched the download progress. 50%, 60%. An explosion rocked the room. Someone had thrown a grenade. Jack was knocked sideways, his ears ringing. He scrambled back to the terminal. The extractor was still working. 75%. Through the smoke, he could see Lyra and Draven locked in combat. They moved like dancers. Each strike precisely aimed. Each block perfectly timed. But Draven was fresh, and Lyra was still recovering from her injuries. She was slowing down. 90%. Jack grabbed his weapon and fired into the smoke, forcing the guards to take cover. Lyra, we need to go. Draven landed a brutal hit to Lyra's side, right where her wound was. She gasped and fell back. Draven raised his weapon to finish her. Jack threw his last smoke charge directly at Draven. The War Master stumbled back, temporarily blinded. Jack ran forward and grabbed Lyra, hauling her up. The data extractor beeped. 100%. Complete. He yanked the device free and half-carried Lyra toward the door. Guards fired at them, but the smoke was too thick. They made it to the corridor and ran. Behind them, Draven was shouting orders. The evidence. Lyra gasped. Did you get it? Yes. Jack supported her weight as they ran. All of it. They raced through the corridors. Alarms were blaring now, and red lights flashed everywhere. Guards appeared at every turn, but Jack and Lyra kept moving. They fought when they had to. Ran when they could. They made it to the service lift and rode it down. On level 5, the lift stopped, and the doors opened to reveal more guards. Jack triggered his last EMP charge, dropping their weapons. He and Lyra pushed past them and kept running. The docking bay was in chaos. Crews were scrambling to figure out what was happening. Jack and Lyra sprinted to the Wanderer. Shots hit the deck around them. Jack returned fire while Lyra got the ramp open. They stumbled aboard and Jack slammed the controls to seal the ship. He threw himself into the pilot's seat and fired the engines before they were even fully powered up. The Wanderer lurched out of the docking bay. Immediately, warnings lit up across the console. The Eternal Rain's weapons were locking onto them. 20 other ships were moving to intercept. Hold on, Jack said, and pushed the engines to maximum. The Wanderer shot forward, weaving between the larger warships. Energy blasts filled the space around them. We cannot fight all of them, Lyra said, clutching her wounded side. We are not fighting, we are running. Jack plotted a jump to hyperspace. It was dangerous to jump this close to so many ships, but they were out of options. A blast hit their shields, draining them by half. Another hit, and they would be disabled. Jack activated the hyperdrive. The ship shuddered, and the stars streaked into lines. They were away. They had made it. Jack slumped in his seat, his hands shaking. Lyra was breathing hard, her face pale from pain and exhaustion. But they were alive, and they had the evidence. We did it, Jack said. Lyra looked at the data extractor in his hand. Now, we finish what we started. We broadcast the truth and watch Draven's empire crumble. Jack nodded and set a course for neutral space. They had one more task to complete. And after that, the galaxy would never be the same. The Wanderer limped through space, with damaged shields and a smoking engine. Jack worked frantically at the controls while Lyra lay in the medical bay, her wound reopened from the fight with Draven. They had jumped 3 times in random directions to throw off pursuit. But Jack knew the Valkyrie fleet would find them eventually. We need to get this data out now, Jack said, connecting the extractor to his communication system. Before Draven can spin the story, he began uploading the files to every network he could access. News outlets, government channels, military frequencies, even civilian social networks. The data was encrypted and verified, impossible to fake. Messages from Draven ordering the assassination of High Admiral Cross, plans for attacks on human colonies, communications showing the conspiracy to seize control of the Valkyrie Empire. Within minutes, the information spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Jack watched the feeds, as news anchors struggled to process what they were seeing. A Velkari war master, plotting genocide and political murder, evidence of corruption at the highest levels of one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. Jack switched on the main galactic news channel. A human reporter was speaking, her voice shocked. "We are receiving confirmation from multiple sources that these files are genuine. High Admiral Cross was murdered by War Master Draven in a coup attempt. The Velkari government has not yet issued a statement." Jack went to check on Lyra. She was conscious but weak. He changed her bandages and gave her pain medication. "It is done," he said. "Everyone knows what Draven did." "Good." Lyra's voice was faint. "Now we wait to see if it matters." The answer came faster than either expected. Within hours, the Velkari fleet began to fracture. Ships loyal to Cross's memory broke formation with Draven's forces. Other admirals, seeing the evidence of Draven's treachery, withdrew their support. The empire that had presented a united face to the galaxy for centuries was splitting apart, but it was the response from humanity that shocked everyone. Instead of preparing for war or celebrating the empire's collapse, human governments sent a message to the Velkari loyalists. They offered medical supplies, food shipments, and even military assistance to those opposing Draven. Jack watched the news in disbelief. They are helping them. After everything the Velkari have done, humanity is sending aid. Lyra pulled herself up to watch the screen. A human admiral was speaking at a press conference. "We do not celebrate the suffering of any people. The Velkari loyalists are fighting against tyranny and genocide. That makes them our allies, regardless of past conflicts." "I do not understand," Lyra said. "My people have raided your colonies, killed your citizens. Why would you help us?" "Why would you help us?" Jack smiled slightly. "Because that is what humans do. We are too stubborn to let old hatreds stop us from doing what is right." He paused. "And maybe because one Velkari commander showed us that your people can change." The civil war was brutal but short. Draven's forces, expecting easy victories, found themselves fighting on multiple fronts. Cross loyalists knew all his tactics and strategies. Human intelligence shared real-time information about Draven's ship movements. Other species that had suffered under Velkari aggression saw a chance for justice and offered their own support. 6 months after the data was released, it was over. Draven made a final stand at the Eternal Reign, but his own crew mutinied when they learned the full extent of his plans. He was captured trying to flee in an escape pod. The Provisional Velkari Council tried him for treason and murder. The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict was unanimous. Jack and Lyra watched the execution from the Wanderer, now repaired and upgraded with money from the grateful Velkari government. Draven stood before a firing squad of soldiers from different Velkari factions, united in this one act. When it was done, Lyra closed her eyes. "It should feel like victory," she said. "But it just feels empty." "That is because good people died to make it happen," Jack replied. "Your father, all the soldiers on both sides, the civilians caught in the fighting. Victory always costs more than we want to pay." Lyra looked at him. "What will you do now? Go back to hauling cargo?" "Probably. It is a simple life, and I like simple." Jack checked the navigation console. "What about you? I hear the new council wants you to take your father's seat." "They do. And I think I will accept." Lyra stood and moved to stand beside him. "Someone needs to make sure his vision for the Empire lives on. A Velkari Empire that builds instead of destroys, that seeks alliances instead of conquest. That is a big job." "Yes. But I have learned from a very good teacher that the right thing to do is often the hardest thing to do." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Jack Morrison, for saving my life, for helping me see the truth, for being exactly who you are." Jack felt his face warm. "I just did what anyone should do." "No. You did what most people would not do. You risked everything for someone you had no reason to help. That is not common. That is extraordinary. Lyra smiled. The humans have a saying, yes, about one person making a difference. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. Yes, that one. Lyra moved toward the cargo ramp. A Velkari shuttle was waiting to take her to the council chambers. Remember it, Jack. You changed the galaxy. One simple act of mercy started everything. Jack watched her go, then turned back to his controls. He set a course for the frontier, where honest cargo needed hauling and the questions were simpler. But he knew his life would never be quite the same. Word of what he had done spread. Other humans started to see that their values, their stubborn insistence on compassion and cooperation, were not weaknesses. They were strengths that could reshape the galaxy. Small acts of kindness began to multiply. Human traders helped stranded travelers. Human doctors treated anyone who needed care, regardless of species. Human diplomats built bridges where there had been walls. The Velkari Empire, under Lyra's leadership and guidance from the new council, began to transform. They reached out to species they had once threatened, offering reparations and partnerships. It was slow work, and there was resistance from traditionalists, but the change had begun. 5 years later, Jack received a message while docked at a frontier station. It was from Lyra, now High Admiral Lyra Cross, named after her father. She invited him to the dedication of a new memorial on the Velkari homeworld. He almost declined. He did not like ceremonies or attention, but something made him go. He took the Wanderer to Velkari Prime and landed at the capital city. The memorial was in the central plaza, a massive structure of polished stone and metal. Thousands of Velkari had gathered, along with representatives from dozens of other species. Lyra met him at the entrance. She wore formal robes now, her white hair braided in the style of High Council members. But her smile was the same. "I am glad you came," she said. "What is this memorial for?" Jack asked. "Come and see." She led him through the crowd to the front of the memorial. It was a statue, carved from a single piece of dark stone. It showed a human helping a Velkari to their feet, a moment of compassion frozen in time. At the base was an inscription in multiple languages. Jack read the human translation aloud. "In honor of those who choose mercy over vengeance, compassion over cruelty, and hope over despair, may their example light our path forward. It is dedicated to my father and all those who believed the Empire could be better," Lyra explained. "But it is also dedicated to you, Jack, to the human who showed us a different way." Jack felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I just helped someone who was hurt. It was not anything special." "I'm said it. Next on. That is exactly why it was special." Lyra addressed the crowd in Velkari, her voice amplified across the plaza. Jack's translator converted her words. "We gather today to remember that empires are not built on fear and domination. True strength comes from lifting others up, from showing mercy when vengeance would be easier, from building rather than destroying." The crowd was silent, listening. Jack saw Velkari warriors standing beside human diplomats, former enemies now standing together. Lyra continued. 5 years ago, one human made a choice. He saved a life when he had no reason to, when it would have been easier and safer to walk away. That choice changed everything. It changed me. It changed our empire. It changed the galaxy. She turned to Jack. Jack Morrison represents the best of humanity, and in learning from him, we discovered the best of ourselves. Let this memorial remind us that we all have the power to make that choice, to be better, to build a galaxy where all species can thrive together. The crowd erupted in applause. Jack stood there, embarrassed and moved. He had never sought recognition. He had just done what felt right in the moment, but looking at the faces around him, seeing former enemies standing together in peace, He understood that small choices could have enormous consequences. After the ceremony, Jack and Lyra walked through the gardens near the memorial. The Valkyrie homeworld was beautiful, with purple skies and silver trees that chimed softly in the wind. "Will you stay for the reception?" Lyra asked. "No. I should get back to work." Jack looked at the memorial one more time. "But thank you for this. For everything. The galaxy thanks you, Jack. Even if they do not all know your name, they live in a better place because of what you did." Jack boarded the Wanderer and lifted off from Valkyrie Prime. As he broke atmosphere and entered space, he looked back at the planet. Somewhere down there, a memorial stood to honor a simple choice made in a moment of crisis. He set course for the frontier and engaged the engines. There was cargo to haul, stations to visit, and a galaxy full of people who might need help. Jack Morrison would be there when they did, doing what he had always done. The right thing, because it was right. And if one person could change the galaxy, then every person had that same power. Every choice mattered. Every act of compassion, no matter how small, sent ripples through the universe that could become waves of change. Jack smiled and settled into his pilot chair. The galaxy was vast and full of problems, but it was also full of people trying to do better, trying to help each other, trying to build instead of destroy. That was enough reason to keep going. That was enough reason for hope. The Wanderer jumped to hyperspace, carrying one human who had learned that the smallest acts of mercy could shatter empires and rebuild them into something better. Behind him, a galaxy slowly transformed by the simple truth that compassion was not weakness. It was the greatest strength of all.